the first human beings appeared comparatively late in the Earth's evolution, and at that time they had a very different constitution from the present. One cannot describe to you the forms of those human beings which first crystallized, so to speak, out of the spirit. Although you have already heard much that is difficult to believe, you would be too greatly shocked if I were to describe to you the grotesque forms of the bodies in which your souls were then incarnated. You would not be able to bear such a description. However, at a later date, when these things which are only now beginning to come to the consciousness of people through anthroposophy, when they increasingly penetrate people's consciousness, this will have to be made known, and it will have a tremendous result. It will be extremely important to the whole life of human beings. For only when human beings learn how their bodies have developed, how the organs they now possess have gradually developed out of entirely different forms, will they feel that remarkable relationship which exists between organs in the human body which today are apparently far apart. They will then see the correspondence between certain organs, for example between the appendix and the windpipe, which in their earlier form grew together in those remarkably formed beings. All that is human being today is the previous form unrolled, as it were, the previous form unfolded in the most varied ways. Organs which today are separated formerly grew together. They have, however, kept their relationship, and very frequently this relationship is manifested in illnesses. It is seen that when a certain organ is diseased, another one becomes diseased in consequence. Hence those who really study medicine will have to make many discoveries of which present-day medicine, which is only a collection of notes, has no inkling. Only then will physicians really learn something about the true nature of man. All this is merely to point out how entirely different people's earlier form was. I.e. solid parts were only built into this human form gradually. There were originally no bones in the human body, even when it had already descended. The bones developed out of soft cartilaginous structures which traversed the human body like cords. These in turn originated from quite soft substances, and these soft substances from fluid ones, the fluid from airy ones, the airy from etheric ones, and the etheric from astral ones which had densified from spiritual substantiality. If you trace it back, you will find that everything material has originated from the spirit. Everything already exists in the spiritual world. It was only in the Atlantean epoch that the bones, which previously existed only in predisposed form, actually developed in human beings. We must now examine Lemurian mankind more closely. We will then understand the writer of the Apocalypse better. I need only indicate that following the first period when the moon had separated from the earth and human beings descended, their will was very different in nature from what it became later. At that time the will of human beings worked magically. It could affect the growth of flowers. When they exerted their will, they could make a flower shoot up quickly, a capacity which can only be acquired today by an abnormal process of development. Hence at that time the natural surroundings depended upon how the human will was constituted. If it was good, it worked soothingly upon the billowing waters, upon the storm, and upon the fiery structures that were then all around, for the earth was to a great extent of a volcanic nature. Human beings worked soothingly upon all this by means of good will and destructively by means of evil will. Thus the human will was in complete correspondence with its environment. The land masses upon which human beings then lived were destroyed essentially by the evil will of human beings, and only a small part of humankind saved itself. We have again here to distinguish between race development and soul development into our epoch. An epoch which we can describe in proper words because we can now find terms in our language that are adequate for the depiction of what clairvoyant consciousness perceives. After this catastrophe we come to the ancient Atlantean epoch, when the human race developed on a continent which now forms the bed of the Atlantic Ocean, between the present Europe and America. At that time human beings lived under very different physical conditions. At the beginning of the Atlantean epoch they were a structure which perceived in quite a different way from present human beings. They still had a kind of spiritual vision, because the construction of their bodies was different from what it is now. The etheric body was not yet so firmly bound up with the physical body. The etheric body of the head extended far beyond the physical body. Only towards the last third of the Atlantean epoch did the projecting etheric body draw in and take the form of the present physical human head. Since the form of the ancient Atlanteans was so very different from that of present human beings, and the parts of their being were so differently joined together, their whole consciousness, their whole soul life was also different. And here, if we wish to understand the writer of the Apocalypse, we must touch upon a very important, but a very mysterious, chapter. If you were to enter this ancient Atlantis, you would find that it was surrounded not by such pure air as the present Earth, but by air saturated with volumes of mist, with water. This air became clearer and more transparently further Atlantis developed, but the mists were densest where the more advanced Atlantean civilization developed. That is where the thickest mists were, and from these the foundations of the later cultures developed. Atlantis was covered far and wide by these mists. A division of rain and sunshine such as we have today did not then exist. Hence in ancient Atlantis what you know as the rainbow could not appear. You might search the whole of Atlantis, and you would hardly find it. Only when the condensation of the water led to flooding, when the great flood spread itself over the earth, could the rainbow come into being physically, and this is a point where on the basis of spiritual science you will gain the greatest respect for the religious records. For when you are told that after the flood Noah, the representative of those who saved mankind, sees the rainbow first appear, this is really an historical event. After the flood mankind saw the first rain EXW. Previously it was an impossibility, simply from the point of view of physics. Here you can see how profound, how literally true the religious records are today. 24 Many people are distressed when one says that the religious records are literally true. Many quote a saying which is true. It is quoted, however, by lazy people, not as a true statement but because they are lazy. It is the saying, "The letter killeth but the spirit giveth life." From this they deduce the right to take no notice at all of what is written in the records, no longer to need to recognize what the records actually say, for they are the dead letter they claim. And so they like to let their intellect shine and concoct all sorts of fantasies. These persons may indeed be very clever in their explanations, but that is not the point. The point is that we ought really to see in the records what they contain. The letter killeth but the spirit giveth life has the same significance in mystical language as Goethe's saying, "If you have not this in you, die, and then become again. You are but a somber guest on earth's dark and gloomy plain." This saying does not mean, if you wish to lead someone to a higher knowledge you must slay him. It means that it is precisely through the culture of the physical world that human beings must uplift themselves to spirituality. In the same way the letter is the body of the spirit, and we must first possess and understand the letter, then we may say that we can find the spirit in it. The letter, the understood letter, must then die so that the spirit may be resurrected from it. This saying is not an injunction to fancy anything you please about what is contained in the religious records. When we recognize the true significance of the rainbow as we have represented it, something like deep respect for the religious records penetrates our soul, and we gain an idea of how, through a deeper knowledge based on anthroposophy, human beings attain a true and genuine feeling for religious documents, and a truly purposeful understanding of them. Let us now look back to ancient Atlantis. We have already said that man then lived in a different state of consciousness, and that his memory was different from what it is now, but the difference is much greater. If we go far back, not merely into the later period of Atlantis but to the beginning, we find a human consciousness very different from what we possess today. Let us once more consider our present consciousness. During the day a person uses his senses. At night he goes to sleep. In his bed lie the physical body and the etheric body, the astral body and the ego withdraw. The sphere of consciousness darkens. Human beings today see nothing and hear nothing. Then, in the morning, when the astral body and the ego re-enter the physical body and etheric body, physical objects once more confront them. How was it in the early Atlantean age? Let us take the moment when in the morning human beings plunged into their physical and etheric bodies. At that time they did not find a physical world around them such as we have today. All the present objects which are now seen with clear outlines were then seen as if surrounded with an aura, with colored edges, quite indistinctly. In ancient Atlantis the appearance was somewhat similar to what is now seen when in the evening there is a dense fog and you see the street lamps not clearly. but surrounded by colored edges. Thus it was in early Atlantis. All objects were seen indistinctly, not with clear outlines and surfaces as today. Everything was as if enveloped in colored mist. Only gradually have clear outlines developed. Had we looked at a rose in the first part of Atlantis, it would have been as if a cloudy structure arose with a red disk in the middle.